Thank you. And Candy, will you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Candy Cooley. I am a peer recovery support specialist, also a community health worker. I'm also in the process of finishing up my DONA certification for prenatal and birth doula services, as well as postpartum doula services. And I also do lactation support as well. So the program I work for is called the ACE program, and we are part of the Drug-Free Moms and Babies. And our site specifically is at WVU Ruby location. So we're located in Morgantown, but I work with families with moms who are dealing with substance use disorder, not just in Mon County, but some surrounding counties as well. Our site actually expanded to Clarksburg as well. We have another peer who's in the Clarksburg hospital as well. But women who are pregnant and deliver at Ruby, we come in and try to help to get them as many referrals for whatever they need. If they need to get a treatment, they need transportation, they need referrals for housing. I also have a baby pantry that I should say mom and baby pantry. I have all kinds of stuff in there for moms too. So, we try to help out with whatever their needs are. So, yeah.
Thank you, Candy. And Rebecca, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, quick question first, Laura. How long does this last? Because I do have a plane to catch.
Oh, it's over at 11.
Perfect. I anticipated an hour. Excellent.
Okay. Yeah.
My name is Rebecca Bledsoe. I have held a variety of hats over the years with and around Child Protective Services. I'm a 30-year career social worker, 6 years in preventative side services, 6 years actually working for the department as a child protective service worker, an adoption worker, and also a home finding supervisor. And then the last 20 years, I have worked for West Virginia University, and I train kinship relative families. And prior to that, we also trained what is now referred to as traditional foster adoptive homes. I am a foster adoptive parent also. And I have experience with a variety of workers from that side. And I have 2 sons who, due to the nature of their special needs, have both post-adoption ended up back in the state's custody through juvenile delinquency proceedings that I initiated in an effort to get treatment for my sons. Currently, I have a kid in Texas, and that's the flight. We're headed to Texas to see the boy, and we never wanted him in Texas, but we also can't maintain him in our home anymore. And so difficult decisions must be made. And I have had both positive and negative experiences with workers. And I respect what y'all do. And it's the hardest job I ever had. And I'll just tell you from a parental standpoint, being the trainer for so many years, like once I became a foster adoptive parent, I realized how little the training actually prepares you to do this stuff. And I have all those different hats. And so I'm always reminded, because I have in my trainings, I have non-readers and I have doctorate level in the same room trying to grasp what's happening. And I cannot, and CPS workers understand the word chaos, understand that the families are in chaos a lot more than you think. And their chaos is just as important to them as a CPS removal would be, or dealing with a suicidal kid, some of the worst things on your caseload, like everybody's crisis is the biggest deal to them. And especially when you feel like you have no hope or help. And that's where CPS can certainly make a difference. So I'm just glad to be here, but headed to Texas. Never been to Texas. Very excited.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Karen, you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Karen Hobbs. I consider myself a CPS survivor. My experience with CPS there's very little positive that goes into it. I do the same thing as PJ and Candy. I'm a peer recovery coach. I'm just taking a break because my mental health needed it. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Karen. And Charity.
Hi, everyone. My name's Charity Ramsey. I have lived experience with CPS. Mine was actually positive. Are you wanting us to give like the rundown of it or CPS thing right now? Or?
Was there like child removal or child
Yes. Okay. So I became involved with CPS on January 29th, 2021. My oldest daughter was removed from my custody due to my substance abuse, and she was placed with my mother, her grandma. I was 5 months pregnant with my youngest. And then on August 6, 2021, my case was dismissed due to successful completion.
So I actually think it's wonderful to round out the year and our year-long echo with this panel because you know, I'm going to make an assumption that all of us are here because we want to improve the process for children and for families. And I love that there's a variety of experiences just on our 5-person panel, ranging from positive to negative and everything in between. Because I think I have certainly, in working with individuals involved with CPS for my entire career, from my very first internship in 1992, like I've seen a full range of how intervention from CPS can be so helpful and necessary to keep kids safe, and also traumatic. And also harmful, like the full range. And so there's never, it's not a black and white thing, although, you know, there are things that go into it that make certain people's experiences more negative and other people's experiences more positive. And it's a system that is underfunded and understaffed. And as Rebecca was kind of saying, many people are not trained or prepared for what they're going to see and encounter, and the problems that will be faced by either the kids they're taking care of or the people that they're working with directly. So I'm going to kind of launch out with a first question for our panelists, and anybody can jump in. All panelists don't have to answer every question. So if the question speaks to you, I want you to go ahead and answer, but I would love for really the questions to come from the audience. So I'm just going to kind of launch us off with an example, and then really anyone from the audience who has a question for our panelists, I encourage them to ask that. So this is kind of a two-part question, and it's the question is, what is one of the biggest challenges you've faced in your experience with CPS and the CPS process, and what advice would you give to someone who is newly found themselves in the system with a newly open CPS case?
One of the biggest challenges that I faced when my case was open was a lack of resources and a lack of someone to help connect me to those resources. You know, I had no idea what to do or where to go for help, and had no guidance from anyone when it came to that. And you know, I was kind of scrambling to try to sort this out on my own, which didn't work out super great for me. And I guess the best piece of advice I could give someone who is newly involved with CPS is to try to find all of the possible resources that you can and start to utilize those. When my case was opened, it was 2016. So a lot of the things that exist today, and a lot of the processes that exist today weren't in place at that time. And I'm from a smaller town. So there were very, very, very limited resources where my case was initiated. So that made it a little more difficult for me.
The biggest challenge I had to face with a CPS, I would have to say the stigma that comes with having a CPS case, that feeling of shame, like, and just guilt. So that was like one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome with the CPS process. And then my best advice for someone who's just coming in for CPS is to advocate for yourself. Make sure if you want to call them 3 times a day, call every day, and you will get a hold of someone. If you need to call above them or call your lighting worker, call everyone. Advocate. Make sure at the MDT meeting, if you want more time with your kids, if whatever you want, the worst they're going to tell you is no. So that would be my biggest suggestion.
Yeah, and I think those two things feel connected, because sometimes my experience with folks is the shame and guilt that people feel prevent them from feeling like I can advocate for myself. So overcoming that is a big, really important piece. Yeah.
I thought about the MDT meeting as well. I thought about, so a lot of times I tell our parents to, of course, I say it's about everything, write notes, either put it on your phone, write a post-it note, all these questions that you think like, oh, I'm going to ask this, I need to ask this, put it on a post-it note. So when you come to the MDT meeting, and I always explain to them that the MDT meeting is almost like a team meeting, and you are a member of that team. So this is your time to ask questions and to talk to people and to find out things. And like Charity said, so, if you want more visits, or you want more time with your kids, or you're wondering about their doctor's appointments, that's the time to ask all those things. Just being able to voice your opinion, I think sometimes is like already knowing what you're going to say. And I think that kind of helps us like already have a plan. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen is actually 2 things. One of is the lack of consistency. I really have a problem. Like, so for our women that I work with who are pregnant and on an MAT, I try to prepare them that their hospital stay, they're going to be for 5 days because the baby is going to be monitored. And of course, CPS is going to be there's going to be a call to CPS, and they're going to come in and check and make sure you're in a program. And oh, I see somebody asked what MAT is. Medicated assisted treatment. So that could be Suboxone, methadone, Sublocade, like, there's a whole list of different medications. So that's automatically fear. Every time I have someone like that, there's like an automatic fear that their baby's going to be taken. Like, that's automatically where they go to. And so I always try to give, okay, this is the best case scenario and this is the worst case scenario. And I really feel bad because I can't give any consistent information, because it's like I could say, okay, well, because you're in a program and because you're doing this and this and this, a case is not going to be open. But that's not always the case. Like I've seen it go both ways. So I can't always say that. And then I think not, like, I know for us not being able, because I know that I've been able to go with some of our parents to MDT meetings just for support. and then sometimes I'm not, you know, and I think like not being, you know, like PJ had kind of mentioned, like I think with CPS not being connected with other agencies is kind of a problem too. I think that that's, you know, if they were more connected, you know, for our program, for instance, like, you know, we're all across the state, drug-free moms and babies is, we're almost at every birthing hospital now. So we have hands-on, you know, a lot of the people that have CPS reports, and you know, we could help provide them a lot of resources and stuff, but a lot of times we don't know the information that's going on with the CPS side either, and you know, it could be more of a team effort, I think.
I think for me, the biggest challenge I had in my case was the lack of knowledge about the disease of addiction. A lot of people in my case didn't understand anything about addiction. And what I would tell someone that's in a case is like, don't ever stop fighting, because there's been plenty of times I could have threw the towel in and gave up, but I never did. And now my kids are home. So you got to fight and fight and fight. But that's what I did.
So having on to that hope is not always easy, and finding resources for hope too.
Challenges from my point of view would be the length of time some of these cases get drawn out from a foster parent's perspective. My youngest son's second case was 5 years long. And part of the reason for that was that the court would not schedule more than a 2-hour hearing to get through testimony. And so it would be continued and it would take another 3 months. And I don't think Child Protective Services has any control over that. And so that's a frustration. And I think the information and communication, I think, is always one of the top things you would hear from parents, foster adoptive parents, because there is a great variance in the worker's skill level. And, you know, now that the system is different and they aren't social workers, you get people that do not have any knowledge of addiction. I thought that was a great point. And kind of the last thing I'll say is one of the things, and I also relate a bit to what Charity said, as a professional, trying to get help for my son, I'm viewed as less than. Like, I don't know if every foster parent has that, but I think a lot of foster adoptive parents feel like they should handle this. And my son's behaviors are not manageable in my home. And just to give you a brief example, my son was hospitalized in acute 7 times in the last 3 months. 6 of those for suicidal ideation, the last one for some destruction he did, because basically that was the only way he was going to end up at the hospital that time. And then Chestnut Ridge wouldn't release him to us, and we were told by the system that if we didn't pick him up, we would be charged with neglect. And the reality is I'm just trying to get help for my son that doesn't exist in the state of West Virginia. His needs are very complex. He was born addicted to 5 different substances. He's a type 1 diabetic with bipolar ADHD, and he's 15 years old with 15-year-old boy hormones that help none of those conditions. And then the frustration between the medical model and the mental health model, who treat the diabetes exactly opposite, which is not helpful. And you think there would be more of that on the same page. But the thing that I want to share with Child Protective Services that just blew me away was when my middle son came home, how stressful reunification was. And I wasn't even in Child Protective Services, I was in youth services. But him coming home, and is he really better? because, you know, you're going from a completely structured environment to a family setting, which is very, very different. The fear about him coming home, I don't think can be stated well enough. And I was actually afraid of my son, because he had done so much destruction. Now, he never touched any of us, but the level of destruction was significant enough that I was actually afraid of my son when he came home. And to my son's credit, I'll tell you that he came home as smooth as can be. He had done the work, we had done the work, his little brother had done the work, and that transition home was better than I could have ever imagined. But the fear gets in the way of accessing services, of I'm glad that we have therapists that I can pretty much say anything to, because not everybody gets it. And it is a struggle sometimes when your kids have these really significant needs. DJ, when he was little, it was a day-to-day, we had a day-to-day discussion of, can we keep him in our home? Can we do this another day? And every day we decided we're going to sleep on it. And the next morning we had enough energy to do another day. And so we did that until he started getting appropriate mental health treatment. And my very first question for the psychiatrist was, how long? How long until he's better? And she told the truth. It was 6 months. She said, it'll be at least 6 months before you have any progress. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do 6 months. But we did. We did it just today. And I have so much more empathy for birth parents than I ever have, because the struggle, I have tons of resources, and there's a huge struggle at times to parent kids that just have a lot of needs. And so appreciate the answers. I think they're right on.
Thank you, guys. I love like the differing perspectives and you know, and the variable experiences, I think are important to share. Any questions from the audience or comments? Anything you want to ask the panelists?
Hi, this question is for Rebecca. I just wanted to find out like what was happening with your son. What services did he need that were not in state that required that he go to Texas?
Because he is a type 1 diabetic, that excludes him from most residential treatment in the state of West Virginia, even if he was compliant, but he was not compliant. And so with a type 1 diabetic, it's dangerous. And so he had overdosed on insulin twice on purpose, and been hospitalized for that. And so, and I, you know, one of the criticisms I would have of this most recent experience was that I couldn't get the youth service worker to listen to us. We had done every single service out there. We had done wraparound services. We had moved on to CSED waiver, which is children with special emotional disorders, through Aetna Better Health. All of them in-home services, all of them progressively more intensive. We've utilized the mobile crisis unit. COVID almost killed us. I mean, I'll just be honest. My boy cannot, that child specifically cannot learn in an online environment. And so he was part of what the school called the 1%. 1% of kids actually went to school during COVID because they could not learn via, and that wasn't well discussed or advertised. But he ended up in school because his needs for education warranted it, even during COVID. And so the type 1 diabetes rules out a lot of placements. There was a level 2 that said that they could handle his diabetes. And because I work in and with the system, I knew that the state wanted to do the level 2 first. So I didn't fight it. And now I wish I would have, because it blew up very quickly. And it excluded him from the hospital that Chestnut Ridge and we wanted for him, that we had carefully selected out of all of the placements. I'll tell you, his youth service worker initially did 30 referrals across the United States, in state and out of state, for him to be placed, and 2 said yes. One was the level 2, and the other was the hospital that we had already vetted. And I had already explored trying to get him there with my insurance, which they would not accept. But they did have a contract with the state for kids that were in the state's custody. And so the only way for me to get him help was to sign something that says that my parental rights can be taken away from me, because that's what Mon County Prosecutor's Office has on the form that you submit to initiate youth services. And so his needs are just, and then because of the nature of bipolar disorder, it interferes with his type 1 diabetes. So for example, when he's manic, he can drop like a rock. And by that, I mean, he can drop over 150 level blood sugar down to 40. And we've seen him do that in 25 minutes. His lowest blood sugar walking and talking is a 26, and he only had slightly slurred speech, and the nurse caught it. And so, you know, he's played football, and we have had to carb him up before practice, send him with snacks, shoving them in his mouth as he's going on the football field. And he still sometimes will have to take breaks. On the other extreme, when he's more on the depressive side, which is where he's been at for probably the last 6 months, maybe longer, he's been running in the 300-400 range. And that can result in coma. And so it's scary. And the folks that said that they could take him do have experience with diabetics, but not one with bipolar. And that's why I knew it would fail, because the 2 feed off each other. And so you have to control one or the other. And we've spent 3 years trying to control the mental health. And now his diabetes, and it's affected him so much that, you know, Chestnut Ridge is like, we must control this first. The good news is that for the last week, he's been below 200 for the first time since he got a pump. The bad news about the pump is that the boy got oppositional and he takes it off. And they're very expensive, and my insurance will only cover so many. And so when he's taken off the very devices that can save his life, or he's overdosing with the very devices that can save his life, how do you send him to school? How do you, and you know, the school's been excellent. But when he's not well, when he's well, I feel like I always need to say this kid is the most lovable, people-pleasing, cool, quirky, great sense of humor kind of kid, very, very adult kind of pleasing kid when he's well. The difficulty is he hasn't been well for 3 years. Part of that was the diabetes coming on, and then the last 2 years, initially he handled it great and was a rock star, and then he just got sick of being the kid that never gets to eat what he wants and not be like his friends and have all these devices. And any one of those would be enough to make an adult struggle. He's got, Andy has a condition that his corneas are gonna, it's called Snyder crystals. He has crystals on his eyes that are going to develop throughout his life to the point that he's going to need a cornea replacement around the age of 30 or 40. His dad has already had it. It's genetic. And then those corneas will get crystals, and he will eventually not be able to see and have to have it done again. Like, this kid's genetics, just, you know, he's gotten one blow after another, after another, after another. And I understand why he's discouraged. I do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think, Rebecca, you kind of highlight the ability to sort of hold boundaries, hold compassion, and love, obviously, for your son, as well as make the hard choices of like not being able to give him what he needs. I mean, those are all like in some ways conflicting needs, and feeling, bring up a lot of conflicting feelings. I'm sure there is something in the chat for you, just if you wanted to take a look at that.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking as a parent to have to ask these systems for help. And then to have people not understand, because that was the repeated questioning, why are you involving the court system? And I've already been through this with another adolescent who needed treatment for reactive attachment disorder, which let's just put that in a whole nother ball game. If you don't have personal experience with reactive attachment disorder, I'm just going to tell you don't understand. You don't. It's very unique in how it manifests. And he still struggles with family, and he's 21. Yeah, Omnipod and the Dexcom is what he recently got approved for, but he'll just take it off and throw it at the person that wants him to wear it because he's not well. Now that he's in Texas, he wasn't motivated to come home. He kept saying, I need to be out of this house. I'm not safe. And we're like, what are you talking about that you're not safe? And mental health would ask him, and he would say, I'm going to punch walls. And that's not something you're supposed to do here. And he knew that. But like, he kept going. So if you look at it from an outside perspective, it looked like he was being very manipulative because he would verbalize suicidal thoughts, not have a plan. But if I don't treat that as a parent, I can be held neglectful. And so I would have EMS come and evaluate him. And literally one time they came and they said, you're right. He doesn't need to go. He needs to learn how to deal with his emotions. And he looked at us all and he goes, do I really have to say it? And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean, son? And he said, do I have to say it? And I said, say what? And he goes, I want to die. And I looked at EMS and I said, take him. Now you could look at that and say that is manipulation, but it is not. It is mental health. He is asking for help the only way that he knows how. And that is what my mantra was whenever we went to the ER or Chestnut Ridge is, I don't understand what's going on with him. All I know is that when he's well and his mood is stabilized and he's treating his diabetes, this is a great kid. And he's not that. And how do we correct that? I've done everything. I can't keep him from eating in a family setting. I can't. He'll just go to his friends and they don't understand at school. The lunch ladies love him. He's cute. It's so, yeah, there's a lot there. There really is.
Thank you. Any other questions from audience members?
So I guess I'll open this up to all the panelists. To a little context and background, as a psychologist here at WVU, I do a lot of parental fitness evaluations for child protective service abuse and neglect cases. And so PJ, your comment and somebody else commented, Candy, I think it was you, about the lack of resources and connection to resources and the lack of connection with other agencies. And this is something that I feel like I see a lot, but do you guys have any thoughts or recommendations on how resources could be better connected, or ways to help? Because I feel like as an evaluator, my job is to give recommendations to improve whatever mental health symptoms may be interfering with their ability to parent. And I look and I'm like, well, CPS really hasn't tried a whole lot of anything at this point in time. So just want to open it up to thoughts you might have.
when I first get a referral and when I meet with one of our moms, I have a intake and assessment form, and it basically, I'm just asking all kinds of questions. And then I know, okay, I need to make a referral to, right from the start, or happy program. I need to make a referral to birth to 3. I need to make a referral to, just based on me asking these questions. And, there might be, a whole bunch of referrals that need to be made, but so like, for instance, like our program, if that one referral would be made to us, our program is set up that we make referrals. So one referral to us would in turn be like a domino effect, and then the whole bunch of other referrals would be made. I know Happy and right from the start is set up the very similar, that like if a family, even families not dealing with substance use, families that when they have their worker come in, the person does an assessment, sees what they need, and then in turn does these referrals for this person. So, I don't even, like, CPS wouldn't even have to really do that if they would just like have a standard that every time they have a person, see what the needs are. Okay, we're automatically going to put this referral in for this person.
So Candy, I'm wondering, in the summary, is there, that we send out afterwards to everybody, is there any information about how to make a referral to you that you could post?
Yes, I will put my email, I'll put my telephone number for people who are or connected with Epic. You can make an Epic referral.
I'm thinking like CPS, like how would that work?
So CPS, all you would have to do is make a phone call, and that would be it. Make a phone call. You can email me. Phone call is a lot better. I don't check my email all the time because I'm not in my office all the time. My office is all over the place.
What's Epic?
Epic is WVU's medical record system. So a lot of times that's how we get referrals, is from labor and delivery or from the OBGYN department.
Separate from my chart.
Yeah, it's kind of the other end. It would be the other end of my chart. But I can get messages through my chart. So if it was somebody who wanted to, because there's sometimes that our women will message me through my chart, say their phone's not working or something, but they can get on my chart. So they'll message me through my chart as well. So, I don't know, you can send smoke signals. I've gotten referrals through Facebook Messenger a lot during COVID, which was kind of, new. I've taken referrals from the parents themselves, family members, their peer recovery support specialists, or, like I said, folks in the hospital, or, anybody they can, we can get referrals anyway.
Yeah, if you can put that in the chat, and then Elizabeth in the summary can make sure that she sends it out to everybody so they have that. Wonderful.
Candy,
Yeah,
if you could put in there what parents would be a good referral for you, if that makes any sense. Like if you have
like what our guidelines are.
Yeah, inclusion or exclusion criteria would be really helpful.
Yep.
Birth to 3 is just an 800 number. And so, the system really needs to look at those gaps. So Candy's got folks that have the substance abuse issue, and then she can attack all sides. That's what I heard her describe, and I love it. And I do think peer recovery was designed to be that. But I'll tell you that DJ's dad has 0 substance abuse issues. I mean, his mother was an addict. She's deceased. She did overdose. But she bore 4 children DJ was exposed to 5 different substances and addicted at birth. And so were all of her children. And so, when you talk about birth to 3, that gets something if there's a delay in the child under the age of 3. But what happens for people that are 3 to 18? Like there's a huge gap there of folks that have either mental health conditions only, or limited intellectual abilities, or other factors that involve them to get involved with child protective services. There's a huge gap there of how do we get those folks plugged in. And I think that's one of the things that has been an ongoing focus, but has never really gotten the attention perhaps that it deserves.
Rebecca, as a parent, I've used birth to 3 with multiple of my children, and I would advocate that it needs to be birth to 4 and not birth to 3, because when these kids finally get services, oftentimes it's age 2 when the language delays are really coming about, and then they get services for a few months and it stops. And if they're not in school yet, then you've got to find private services and everything. So I agree with you, it's a great service, but it drops immediately at 3, and that is
Well, I've done social work so long, I'll tell you that I was a birth to 5 teacher in a birth to 5 center. It used to be birth to 5, and then they did funding cuts, transfer to age school at age 3. And if the child still has a delay, your birth to 3 should be setting up either a 504 meeting or an IEP so that they do continue to get those services. DJ started school at age 3. And so that's something that you might want to educate clients on, that if there's still an existing delay, they should be receiving school services. And that doesn't mean they have to go to school to get those services, but they can.
wonderful.
One of the things that I've thought about in this process that would help to fill those gaps that Candy and Rebecca talked about is having peers available to individuals that are involved with CPS. Whether those be employed by Child Protective Services themselves, the DHHR, or like contracted with a local agency to help facilitate those connections and referrals to whatever services they need. And those peers can be individuals who have lived experience with mental health issues, with CPS involvement, with substance use disorder, and or all 3 of those. Because peer recovery is a support modality that has a proven track record of success. It helps people connect to resources, and helps people connect back to their communities, and helps people connect with other individuals. And that support is essential in helping those individuals navigate the difficult things that they need to navigate when it comes to dealing with substance use disorder, mental health disorders, and being involved with child protective services. And I really, really believe that would be one of the most beneficial things to have in place. And as far as like, if Child Protective Services wanted to have those individuals in-house, there's grant funding available, especially in the state of West Virginia. There's grant funding available to help offset the cost of that, at least in the beginning. So it could be set up to where it wouldn't be, they could use those grant funds until they're gone, and it wouldn't be as cost prohibitive as just hiring them straight out. And that would take some of the pressure, I believe, off of the CPS workers themselves, because they can focus. I know they have large caseloads, so instead of them having to put in all these referrals, they can send those individuals to those peers and say, hey, you guys sit down, discuss what services are needed, and the peer can start putting in those referrals. And that's just my thoughts on one of the things that I thought would be super beneficial to this process.
Yeah, we're going to be kind of having some conversations with some higher level DHHR folks with some of our recommendations, and that's one of them, both as a way to support CPS workers that are overworked, overstressed, underpaid, all of that, with a peer resource, which I think would be really helpful, as well as, you know, some other recommendations that we've been thinking of. I did want to circle back to a couple things. I know we're running short on time. Just a point of clarification. So, Rebecca, you talked about babies born exposed to substances and babies born addicted. So just to clarify, by definition, a baby is not born addicted to substances because by definition, addiction involves obsessive thinking and compulsive behavior, and that's not what's going on with a newborn. They can certainly be born with physical dependence and therefore experience withdrawal. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that language as we help people understand what addiction is and what it isn't.
Yeah, it was 15 years ago, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's definitely changed over the
Yeah.
years. Yeah. And family court does kind of have that. Family treatment court does have that model that Preston's talking about. And it also has a proven track record in terms of research effect. You know, it's not being spread amongst the state quite as quickly as I would like to see it.
Yeah,
But
Yeah, and my conversations with judges more recently has been that it likely won't be available everywhere in the state, which is unfortunate.
well, that's because the judges won't permit it. That is why. And so it is interesting to me that a judge can choose not to follow a law that, especially one that the voters say. So I don't know.
Well,
There's
And actually, I should
pockets.
clarify the conversation I was having. I said, why don't we put this in every county in the state? Just get it out there. And it was more thoughtful. I mean, this judge does have it in his county, but he said that, you know, a family treatment court is only as good as the judge. You've got to have a judge who is interested and invested and believes in the process. And so they didn't want to push it to judges they didn't believe would be invested, for fear of it being more harmful than helpful.
Yeah. Although I think what PJ was talking about too was having peers potentially embedded in kind of the CPS services system, and that would be another way to kind of get peer recovery support in there if that particular, you know, drug treatment court was not a way to do that. I did want to just touch base there with Charity. Charity, you had mentioned when you introduced yourself that actually being involved in CPS was helpful to your recovery. Can you share a little bit about how that worked for you?
I say it was helpful because of the accountability that I knew I had to stay sober. I had to get drug tested. It was the quickest way to get my kid back. And I was also pregnant. But like I went straight to detox, like right after CPS stepped in. They didn't give me any resources. I can say they gave me the number for Hope and Healing, but they don't take you. You got to do a detox first. I went myself to the ER and just told them, I'm pregnant. I need to go to detox. And actually, WVU is the one who got me all the COACH program, like all the resources, detox, Hope and Healing, the COACH program, ACE program, did all the referrals and did all that for me and set me up a nice support system. Can't really say CPS did that for me. But I mean, as far as my case, it went really smooth. My worker, I liked her. She was really nice to me. She encouraged me to do good. She kept me updated. Like if I called, she called me back. I didn't have to, I hear that a lot, that people can't get a hold of their workers. They don't know what's going on. My first one was not bad at all. And it helped me through the process not to feel so discouraged and hopeless.
Yeah, and I think that's important to know, like how big a role the CPS worker can play with that, like helping you maintain hope and holding you accountable. Like it's both and that is a way to support someone in recovery. Any final kind of thoughts or comments? Thanks, Candy, for putting that in there.
One thing I did want to say, like when it came to CPS, is I hear a lot of the times, like, you are kept in the dark a lot. Like, I'd have to call the guardian ad litem and my attorney, different things. So, like, if there's a way to implement like updates for the parents, like instead of just, I have no clue what's going on, like even if that would be the peer support, they end up getting that. That's like, hey, this is, even if it's just, hey, the case is still, you have a court hearing this day, there's not much going on this week, just do your drug test, drug court, whatever it is. Like that, I think that would be really helpful to people instead of just parents, especially, then instead of just being kept in the dark.
Mhm. And if there was a way to do that, that was, didn't have an increased burden on the worker,
Yes.
but facilitated that communication. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a good idea.
Before we jump off here, I just want to thank everyone for listening and allowing us to come and share our experience with everyone.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask the panelists, can we ask the panelists to just hang back briefly after the echo's over?
Yeah.
Elizabeth, any kind of,
Oh, thank you so much. I just really appreciated listening to everybody's stories and input, and I think this is a very important topic, so can definitely have more of those lived stories again. So we appreciate your guys's vulnerability. Thank you.
and thanks everyone for coming, and hope you guys have a good holiday and a safe New Year's.